New Orleans,
Hmm.
French Quarter. A city just live with, New Year's celebrations. It's a scene of joy, music, anticipation. But in the early hours of 2025, that celebration, well, it turned into tragedy. A vehicle plowed right into a crowd on Bourbon Street, and it left behind, just a scene of chaos and heartbreak. You wanted to understand what happened in New Orleans that night, and we've got, well, a collection of sources to kind of help us piece this terrible event together. We've got Reddit posts, we've got international news reports,
Yeah.
and even some local coverage.
Yeah. It's a heartbreaking situation, and we have the bare facts, but I think understanding the deeper context here is really essential.
Exactly, and we know the basics. It happened around 3:15 a.m. on Bourbon Street. A vehicle drove into a crowd, and,
Huh.
and the city's emergency preparedness department, NOLA Ready, they confirmed 10 fatalities, and 30 injuries. But there are just so many layers to try to unravel here.
Absolutely. Even in the initial reports, we see discrepancies, like a now removed Reddit post from I think it was World News. He claimed that a shooting followed the crash, but none of the other sources support that, and it just highlights how misinformation can easily spread in these situations.
Yeah, that's a great point. Makes you realize how important it is to be cautious about what we see and what we read, especially online. We're focusing on verified information here, like eyewitness accounts from CNN. They really capture the terror of that night.
Yeah. Yeah. One witness, Kevin Garcia, described a truck slamming into everyone. He saw a body fly towards him.
Yeah.
And he even said he heard gunshots, although,
Yeah.
as we said, that hasn't been confirmed by official sources. Another witness, Whit Davis, was in a nightclub when they heard screaming, and when they were finally allowed to leave, they were met with this horrifying scene.
Yeah. Reading those accounts, I can't help but think about how I'd react in such a situation. It's a sobering reminder of how quickly things can change and how vulnerable we can be, even in a crowd.
Hmm. It's a natural response. And these stories, they highlight the human cost of this tragedy. But to understand its full impact, we need to consider the context. New Orleans was just hours away from hosting the All-State Sugar Bowl, and that's a massive event for the city.
I'm struck by how this tragedy unfolded just hours before the Sugar Bowl. I mean, what do you think this means for the city, especially with so many visitors present for the game?
It's hard to imagine the weight of this event on a city already preparing for such a massive influx of people. The Sugar Bowl, Georgia playing Notre Dame, it's more than just a game.
Yeah.
It's a cultural touchstone. It's a huge economic driver for New Orleans. The potential ripple effects of this tragedy they're immense.
Absolutely. And speaking of impact, the media coverage itself adds another layer to this story. We have a Reddit post from Our Conservative that focuses on potential political angles.
Yeah.
What were those angles, and how did they frame the narrative compared to, say, the BBC or CNN?
The Our Conservative Post, it suggested the incident could be linked to broader social unrest. And it kind of pointed to lenient policies they believe contributed to the environment where such tragedies occur. This contrasts sharply with the BBC's, on-the-ground reporting, and CNN's focus on eyewitness accounts, both of which aim to present a factual account of the event as it unfolded.
Yeah, it's fascinating how these different perspectives, how they shape the narrative, and it makes you wonder how those differing viewpoints might influence public perception and understanding of the event.
It really does. It underscores the need to be critical consumers of media, especially in the wake of such events. We need to be aware of potential biases, whether it's sensationalism or pushing a particular agenda.
That's such an important point. We can't just passively absorb information. We need to question, analyze, and look for the full picture. It's like we're piecing together a puzzle, right? We have these fragments of information from different sources, and we're trying to make sense of it all. Being mindful of potential biases and misinformation. It's a real challenge.
It is. It is. And this event in New Orleans, sadly, it isn't an isolated incident. We've seen this disturbing trend of vehicles being used as weapons, causing mass casualties and fear. It forces us to confront some tough questions about security and the motivations behind such horrific acts.
You're right. It is a chilling thought, and I find myself thinking, how do we even begin to address such a complex issue? There's the immediate need to prevent these kinds of attacks, but then there's the deeper question of why they happen in the first place.
It's a multifaceted problem, and it demands a multi-pronged approach.
Yeah.
But Are all those approaches equally effective? Where should we prioritize efforts,
Mm,
especially given limited resources?
yeah.
We need to consider uh, strengthening physical barriers in public spaces, increasing surveillance, and those are important. But we also can't ignore the root causes.
Yeah.
Addressing extremism, fostering social cohesion, those are critical long-term solutions.
I see what you mean. It's not just about reacting to the symptoms. It's about understanding the disease, so to speak. But let's shift gears a bit and talk about the immediate aftermath in New Orleans. The local news reported that the city was just hours away from hosting the Sugar Bowl. I can only imagine the impact this tragedy had, especially with thousands of fans already in town for the game.
Yeah, it's hard to fathom the emotional toll on the city. I mean, New Orleans is known for its resilience, especially after Hurricane Katrina. But this kind of event, layered on top of a major celebration, it must have been incredibly difficult. The Sugar Bowl, with all its excitement and economic benefits, it suddenly took on a very different feeling.
Absolutely. It's heartbreaking to think about. We may not have all the details yet about the investigation from the sources we have, but I assume the authorities are working tirelessly to figure out what led to this and to bring those responsible to justice.
Yes, of course. The investigation is crucial.
Right.
But we also can't lose sight of the human impact. The victims, their families, the witnesses, even the first responders, everyone involved needs support and healing. And this is where organizations dedicated to trauma recovery and community resilience become so vital. They'll play a crucial role in helping New Orleans navigate through this difficult time.
Yeah. It really emphasizes how interconnected everything is. You know, the joy of a celebration, the suddenness of tragedy, the media's role in shaping our understanding, and the long-term questions about security and community resilience. We've covered a lot of ground in this deep dive. What stands out to you as we try to process this event?
For me, it's the stark contrast that lingers. New Year's Eve,
Hmm.
a time for hope and new beginnings, transformed into a scene of unimaginable loss and fear. It's a jarring reminder of how fragile our sense of safety can be,
Ah.
especially in places we associate with celebration and togetherness.
Yeah. That resonates with me too. It makes me wonder, how do events like this, where the ordinary is so violently disrupted, change our perception of safety, especially in public spaces? Do we become more cautious, more aware?
It's a natural response to question our assumptions about safety after witnessing such a tragedy. We often move through the world with a sense of normalcy, believing that these kinds of events happen, somewhere else. But when they intrude on our lives, even through news reports, it forces us to acknowledge a certain level of vulnerability that we may have overlooked before.
Yeah, yeah. It's a difficult truth to confront, but it feels like an essential conversation to have. It's not about living in fear, but about recognizing that there are risks and being prepared, both individually and as a community.
Exactly. It's about finding that balance between awareness and resilience. We can't let fear paralyze us, but we can take steps to be more vigilant, to look out for each other, and to report anything that seems suspicious. There's strength in shared responsibility.
I think that's a powerful takeaway for all of us. Tragedy, as devastating as it is, can also illuminate the importance of community, of coming together to support one another, and of working collectively to create a safer world.
And even amidst the heartbreak, there's hope. We see it in the first responders who rush to help, and the medical professionals who work tirelessly to save lives, and in the outpouring of support from people all over the world. Those acts of compassion and courage, they remind us of the strength of the human spirit.
That's a hopeful note to end on. This deep dive into the New Orleans tragedy has been a difficult one, but I think it's helped us grapple with some important questions and understand the event on a deeper level. And while we can't erase what happened, we can learn from it, grow from it, and work together to prevent such tragedies in the future.
Absolutely. And remember, there are resources available if you need support or want to learn more. Stay informed, stay engaged, and let's continue this conversation as we strive to create a world where events like this become less and less frequent.